Caitriona Balfe, I think the genius of Outlander is that it appeals to women who feel like disenfranchised in a male world. Its protagonist is a woman and she has secret powers. She travels back and forth in time and she heals people. What do you think? Do you think that's a fair enough assessment?
That's an interesting take on it, definitely. I think there is something really nice about seeing this woman be so capable in, in the past, especially where it was a very patriarchal society. And I think that women still a lot of the times, experience, whether it be sexism or, they're doing double shifts where they're like full-time workers and full-time carers of their kids and all of these things. And I think that fantasy of this other place that they could maybe go to where there's this very dashing Highlander waiting for them, and where they're just so capable and nothing really gets to them. I think that's something that's very attractive to people.
Yeah, and then you couple that with this fearless romanticism. Now, I'm stealing from our fearless leader, Tom O'Neill, who is such an unabashed devotee of the show, but he says, the show has such a fearless romanticism. It's a love story at its core, and it's not afraid to go there. Like a lot of shows are these days. You've got to be kind of cool and edgy, and you're not allowed to be romantic. This show just goes for it, and that's why people are falling in love with the love on the show. Do you think that would be another fair assessment of why the show is so powerfully popular?
Yeah, I mean, I think that purity of the relationship between Claire and Jamie is something that people really respond to. And it's funny in many ways because we've gone to such a purist romantic version of that love story. In many ways, people are lauding us as doing something that's groundbreaking and, very new for right now. And it's funny that perhaps in our just returning to more, I don't know, traditional or it's not really traditional because they're partners and they're equals, and I think that that's something that's great. But yeah, I think it's interesting that the romance is something that people really love about it.
Yeah, they really do, and it could have been a disaster had you and Sam not been a very good fit. Thankfully, that is not a problem. Much of the show is successful because you and Sam Hewen have this wonderful dynamic relationship on screen. And talk us through that, how you and Sam developed that on screen, because it's come to a point now where when you're on screen together, it's something kind of really special.
Well, thank you. I think Sam and I, well, first he got cast first. So I was just lucky enough that our chemistry worked, that they gave me the job. But, from day one, when we did our first screen test together and, it was a chemistry read and I think everyone was waiting to see how we would play together. And we have a very similar approach, I think, to life and to our acting, and we like to, commit fully and I don't think it would work if you didn't. You have to believe in it in the moment. You have to give your all. And, from our very first scene when we did that screen test, I mean, we got into this fight and, Sam had me in a bear hug and I was trying to shake him off me and he ended up like punching me in the face in mid scene, and we just kept going and it just felt really fun. And when they yelled cut, a little while later we were both like, whoa, that kind of got quite intense. But we from the very beginning, it was interesting because we had a lot of time to let the relationship develop organically, because the way that season one was laid out, a lot of the early stuff that we filmed was the Frank and Claire, and then as we were getting into the Jamie and Claire stuff, it takes a while for their relationship even to grow and develop. So all that time, Sam and I were becoming better friends, and we would talk a lot about what we felt that relationship was and why it was different to the love that she felt for Frank and what made it special and what made it different. And so I think that having that, being so lucky to have that amount of time and that just to let it sort of organically develop was I mean, it's priceless, and you don't always get that.
Yeah, you really don't. It is really rare. It's also rare in this day and age to have the opportunity for an actress to play a strong leading woman on a TV show. And I know you've talked about that before and how it's such a great opportunity for an actress like yourself. But the angle that I'm thinking about is this show is different because it's told through a woman's gaze, which is really, really rare on television these days, especially on premium cable where everything is really edgy and it's about the anti-hero and it's about violence and it's usually told through a man's perspective. This has completely subverted that. What are your thoughts on that and the opportunity of playing not only a strong woman at the center of the show, but from her perspective?
Well, I think that there is a shift right now that more and more shows are starting to be told from a woman's perspective and have central female characters. And I think that that's so wonderful. And I hope that that trend continues. But it's incredible. I mean, when I first read the book, I was just sort of blown away by the fact that this was a woman's story and you see it through her eyes. She goes into all of these, crazy circumstances and it's in, very different time periods, but yet she doesn't change and she doesn't back down and she doesn't hide her opinions. And I love that, but also she doesn't really have to pay a price for being the woman that she is. And I think that that's also very different. I think sometimes you see shows where they have a woman and she's the central character, but it's almost like she has to pay the price for being strong and that it comes at a cost, whether it be her mental health or maybe she has an addiction or something like that. And this was a show where that wasn't the case. I mean, obviously tragedy befalls Claire throughout the series, but it does as much so to the male characters. And I think that what we're after experiencing is having a show with a female gaze. In some ways, what ends up happening is because, the female character is so fully formed, but also so are our male characters. So it's this great balanced view on a relationship and on a couple and their journey. And that's what makes really interesting TV, when it's not just this one-sided great male character and then this very thinly drawn female character. And that way you don't get a proper sense of the marriage and it doesn't carry the same weight. So I just thought it was such a great opportunity. And it's like sometimes you get lucky in life, and this was definitely one of those times.
Yeah, I can imagine that your life is really different now than it was years ago when you were just, getting into the business and getting really good parts. But this one would have been, would you agree, the big breakthrough that has changed everything?
100%. I joke around with my friends. There was about 4 years, 3.5, 4 years when I was in LA and I was auditioning and I was a professional friend. That's what we used to say, because I was the girl. If you needed a lift somewhere, if you needed to talk about anything, I'm available, just call me. So that's what I did for about 3.5 years before I got this job. And so it's nice. It's so wonderful to have something that's mine. And I feel, I don't know, so full because of it. I mean, just my life is so much fuller, and I feel, I think I had a career before where a lot of the times I was very frustrated, and, you would work hard and you would be tired and you would put your all into it, but the reward wasn't there. And with something like this, I very much feel that every day, the reward is there in the doing. And that's incredible, to just love what you do so much.
Yeah. I mean, you hear that a lot from actors and other people in this business, that you toil really hard in the trenches for a long time. Generally, some people get a break right at the beginning, but generally you work really hard to get to a certain point where you can be doing material that you love. Then some of you even get to go to red carpets and you get to win awards and you get to be nominated. And given that we're Gold Derby, let's talk about that for a bit. Let's be a little bit more shallow, because Outlander exceeded expectations. Well, not for us. We were saying from the get-go, you guys are going to get Golden Globe nominations. No one believed us, and there you were, you, Tobias, and the show. Talk us through that experience of being in that room with all those A-listers and on that red carpet.
I mean, It was just wild. I still think it's a bit of a dream or something that happened. I mean, we're in Scotland and we were shooting when we found out, and you know, first of all, my driver had gotten a text from someone to say that Tobias had gotten nominated, and I straight away called him, and we were screaming down the phone at him, and we were like, "Oh my God, you got nominated! This is crazy!" And you know, and then him and I were chatting on the phone for about 10 minutes. So it was about 10-15 minutes later, I went into my trailer, and next thing, my phone, when I hung up, it just started beeping and, you know, just blowing up. And I was like, and so I found out that the show and that I got nominated. And, you know, I think that situations like that, it's just such a cherry on top of all the other good things that have happened. But to be able to be in a room and to see someone like Mark Rylance, or to see you know, Patricia Arquette, or, you know, these people that I've looked up to all my life, or be even in a category with the women that I was in. I mean, for me, like Viola Davis and Robin Wright, those are, I mean, Ava Green as well. Like, I remember seeing Dreamers years ago and just being like, wow, that woman is incredible. And you just, I don't know, you can't believe that you're there, because it wasn't that long ago that myself and my friend were blagging our way into an after party, you know, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And it's wild when you think in such a short space of time that you've gone from, you know, that to then being inside and sitting there for a legitimate reason, and for doing something that you love. I mean, that's just insane.
Yeah, it is. I can imagine it would be surreal, but now everyone's taking Outlander really seriously. We're in Emmy season. The ballots were they were announced, or sorry, they were issued yesterday online, and Outlander is all over the ballots for Emmy consideration. So we broke the story a week or two ago that if you're nominated as Best Actress, you'd submit the episode Faith, which is kind of a no-brainer. Like, it wasn't a huge surprise that you would submit that one. But that leads me to this. Let's talk about Faith, because that's what a lot of people probably have been asking you about for the last few weeks. The heartbreaking portrayal of Claire having suffered a miscarriage. James in the Bastille, so you're trying to get him out. There's a lot to do. What were your reactions when you first got that script and you realised this is going to be a really big one for Claire?
Yeah, well, I knew that storyline was coming up. I mean, obviously, I'd read the book, and, you know, it was just it's one of those moments where, probably in a very perverse way, as an actor, you're like, oh, good. But because, you know, I felt like last season, Claire never really had time for anything to land on her. She, you know, she was sort of jumping from one terrible situation to the next. And so this season, I was more interested in trying to unravel the emotional life of Claire, and who is this woman, and what does she really think behind all of these terrible events. And so when I got Faith, I mean, the writing was so beautiful. Toni Graphia has such a poetic ability when she writes her scripts, and I cried the first time I read it. And there was just such beautiful moments, and, you know, one of them was this, I mean, the moment that killed me when I read it was when Claire sings to her baby, and sings this very beautiful, I mean, to me, it's also a song that I've known all my life. You know, it's a song that I used to sing with my parents in the car when I was like 3 or 4. You know, I do like to be beside the seaside. And it's such a fun summer song that you would sing, and to have that be, oh, it was heartbreaking. I mean, it's just, even now I get goosebumps thinking about it, because it's just the love of a mother and a child. You know, that's, you know, whatever about the love with Jamie and Claire, and I mean, that's all consuming for Claire, but the love of a mother and child, I don't think there's anything that will compare to that ever. And, you know, for Claire, who wanted so much to be a mother and never really thought it was possible, and then to have the joy of that being a possibility, and yet struggling to find the outlet to celebrate it because of everything else that was going on. And then just as everything was starting to come together, have it all unravel in the worst way. It was heartbreaking. And you know, yeah, I just couldn't wait in some ways to start filming it.
Yeah. As artists, you get to explore certain themes and express them. They're entertainment, but they also allow us to reflect on our own lives. And this is a subject matter that many people deal with. It's very, very common. And I'm wondering if you've received a lot of feedback from people, fans and colleagues, about how the way that the production really tackled it was just so perfectly effective that it really did touch a lot of people, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about what we do is that, yes, we're entertainment, but also sometimes we can be cathartic for people, or we can, give a voice to something that people may have buried deep inside in their own lives because they haven't had the opportunity or they don't feel comfortable talking about it. And lots of people reached out to me saying that they'd been affected by it. And I know so many people affected by it. And that was one of the things that really was with me when I was even filming it, because we filmed it in Glasgow Cathedral. And I remember day one, we were doing, I think it was more where I was lying on the sort of ER table, as Tony likes to think of it. And between scenes, because I was trying to stay very focused and I was trying to stay in a certain space. And in this Glasgow Cathedral, it was built originally in the 1100s, at least some part of it was, but there's many different altars all around it. And we were filming down sort of in the bowels of this building, and I would go upstairs and I would sit at this one little altar and I would listen to my music. There was certain music that I was listening to over and over, and it just struck me on that first day. And I was like, wow, like, God, how many women must have come here to pray or to ask for solace or to somehow seek comfort for a very similar thing. And, this, I'm talking centuries, so you're talking thousands and thousands, and how many of them had no outlet for any kind of comfort because it wasn't something that maybe they could talk to their husbands even about, or, whatever it be. And I just became almost like bowled over by this feeling of grief that hung in this building. And it was really overwhelming, and it was really humbling, and it was really, in some ways as an actor, as an artist, in many ways you're just a vessel to channel somebody else's or your character's feelings and emotions. And it just became very clear to me. I was like, I'm just here to hold a space for Claire's grief, and I'm just here to hold a space for the grief that sits in this place. And it was kind of, maybe a little hippy dippy, but it was powerful. It was. And I feel very grateful. I feel very grateful that, things conspired to, that the fact that we shot in that particular place and that it was for this scene. And, as an artist, I think you're very grateful when everything sort of comes together and allows you to be in the right space at the right time for what you're doing. And I just felt that happened for that.
Yeah, well, the reaction that I saw on social media was something that I've never really seen before. It was people really, really responded to it. And it's such a showcase for you because not only do you have all those scenes, but the episode does move into other areas, in the Star Chamber, which, by the way, is like a masterclass in production design. I've never seen anything so awe-inspiring than that, right? How incredible was that?
I mean, it's funny because it really felt like, there was the beginning and there was this part, and then we went into that other part. And, it was taking between 12, I think when we started, it was probably around 15 minutes because we were doing it in single long takes. Yeah. So it started off at about 15 minutes, and then we got it down to about 12. And the production design of that place was incredible. I mean, everyone walked in. I mean, it looks like a marble palace. And then you realize that it's all hand painted, and this dome with all of the piercings and the light shafts coming through. I mean, it was just magical. And there was this beautiful, weird echo. If you stood in the center of the room, it would almost transport your voice to the other side. It was really, It was very, very special. And, you know, Lionel Lessinger and Stanley Weber and Dominique Pinon. I mean, you know, I get so lucky because I'm the person who gets to work with nearly everybody. And that's, you know, one thing that I'm constantly grateful for, because they're just all such incredible actors. And, you know, it felt like the right, you know, tete-a-tete of the Comte and Claire finally. And it was incredible. But it was, you know, the work that everybody put into that scene. I mean, you're talking like the cameraman who's on like a steady cam, and those things weigh a ton. And it was a very hot room as well. And, you know, for 12, 15 minutes, they're silently tracking your path, and they're right there with you. And you know that everybody is just in it to just get it done and do it in the best way that we can. And, you know, Stanley's death scene as well was just, I don't know how he didn't knock himself out, because every time he went for the floor, you know, he just went down. And it was amazing. I mean, and it was a great thing to see Claire, who had lost at this point everything. And it, you know, what happened with Fergus and what his story to her, that was the kick. That was the, like, okay, are you going to lie down and die, or are you going to fight to live? And so this was Claire's fight. And to see her put on this act and to be just so fearless it was amazing. And yet there was just so much of her, because she had nothing else to lose. So it was this great sort of play of, when somebody just doesn't care anymore in so many ways, they can just do anything because there's nothing to lose anymore. So that was a great scene.
That's a perfect way to put it. And you reminded me that you mentioned Lionel and Stanley, Dominique and Andrew Gower and Francis Delatorre. You've had so many really cool guest actors and recurring actors on this show, right? Really good ones.
I mean, Suzanne Smith, who does our casting, there's never been a bum note. And also, not only are they incredible actors, but every single person is so cool. Like, we have and we always say it, if somebody walks onto our set and isn't cool, they'll hear about it very quickly, because there's no space for divas and there's no space for egos, and everyone who comes on is just like awesome. And we have a great, we have a great atmosphere on set, and everyone comes on and they're all so excited to be on the show, and they all are such talented actors, and it's great. And it makes, because we work really hard and you're there a lot, and, you know, to keep that great energy that constantly comes in from other people, it keeps us inspired, and it keeps us like enthusiastic and ready to like tackle new stuff, because it keeps it fresh all the time. And that's so important, because, you know, after, when you're getting like 10 months and into like 14-hour days, you know, all the time, you know, I can imagine on something that was less mutable, that maybe things would get a little stale, or maybe you wouldn't come with that fire every day. I don't know, but I'm very glad that it is the way it is.
Yeah, we all are. Let's talk about a couple more of your highlights from the season so far. We still have a couple more episodes to go, which we're all desperate to see. But going back to the season premiere, you're back in the present day, so to speak, or present day for Claire, and she's desperate to know what's happened at Culloden, and she spends a lot of time, shares a lot of screen time with Tobias, who's playing Frank, which we haven't seen a lot of this season, unfortunately. And that reminds me that you also have a really great rapport with Tobias on screen. He is a fan favourite in his dual roles. Talk us through the season premiere, and I think we see you first on that street, just kind of like in this state of what the hell is going on.
Well, yeah, you know, when we first got that script, which I guess was a little bit earlier than we would normally get stuff, being that it's, you know, the opening episode. I love the Claire and Frank stuff, just because it's so complex. And especially this, you know, this writing, and Ron wrote it, and Ron has he's just such a fantastic writer, and he knows so well how to just get you emotionally, you know. And it's just like, Frank is so open and so hopeful and so emotional, and you're like, oh, the poor guy, because You know, and he's done nothing wrong. At this point, he has done nothing wrong. He lost his wife. He's grieved her. And then he finds out she's back and he's prepared to accept whatever. But for Claire, everything has changed now. She is a completely different woman. She will never be able to love him the way that she did. And so I really wanted to, well, I thought that, you know, having lost everything, you know, it's hard because you're talking about what's happening at the end of the season at the beginning. But you know, she's just like put a wall up around her heart, and she also, you know, in a way has to be cruel to be kind. And if she even gives Frank an inch or an opening into believing that they will ever be able to go back to the way they were, then she knows that she's just going to hurt him even more. So for me, it was tough because you're trying to make that decision to have somebody, you know, you don't want to play shut down because then there's nothing there. But in a way, I wanted to try and show that she's locked her heart and she can't give in to this emotion that Tobias is coming to you with. And believe me, as an actor, it's so hard not to want to match him because he was just so full and incredible in those scenes. And I'm like, don't cry, just don't cry. She doesn't want to cry, you know. And because he does, you get so affected by what he's doing, and it's so heartbreaking. But she just had to put a lock on her heart and be like, no, if I give in to him, if I seek comfort, if I give him comfort, if I do any of those things, it will give him hope. And I can't give him hope because there is none. I'll never love him the way I loved him, and I'll never not love Jamie. And so, yeah, it was such rich stuff. I mean, like you could just mine that forever. And yeah, I love all that stuff. It's just as an actor, you're like, oh, thank God I get to play this.
That's gold. And then a few episodes later in the Versailles courtyard, which again was like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen with all those costumes and sets. Claire and Jamie encounter Blackjack, and so again, a lot of it is left unsaid. It's all on your faces, and you are again Claire is controlling her reactions to Randall. It's just like a complete twist. It subverts what you were doing in the first episode. It's really effective as well, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, when we first read that, I think everyone was like, "What? You can't have them just stand there in front of the king. Like Jamie would try and kill him. Like." No, and then you realize that the genius of that writing was allowing all of that tension to just exist under the surface, because by putting them in that situation and by putting them in front of the king, they can't do what they would normally do. And I mean, if Jamie under any normal circumstances first saw Blackjack, I mean, he would instantly kill him. But by putting them under the constraints of this protocol, it just, everyone has to keep everything tied in, and it was wonderful. And Claire just can't help herself; she's seething, and yet when the king arrives, they have to just twist it all, and then yet to see that humiliation of Blackjack by the king was so wonderful, and Lionel was so great in that, and Tobias was so great in that, and it's just that you should beg, beg on your knees, and it was just wonderful to be able to stand there and watch that happen. I mean, again, as actors, without great writing, you're at sea without any help at all. And I just think we're very, very lucky. We have such a great writing team, and it's always starts there, and it starts with the source material and then what they do, and that's it's great to have that.
It is. Your final highlight that I wanted to raise was Just We Pressed, where we get to go back to World War II, and we are reminded that Claire has been through a lot. She's experienced a lot, and she does have some PTSD with the effects of war have really kind of changed her. And she's seeing it just repeating again. Well, she's gone back in time to another war, and she just sees she's going to see more bloodshed. Talk us through those scenes, because they would have been quite a challenge, shifting back and forth in time.
Yeah, I mean, I loved that Matt Roberts came to me and told me he was writing that, and I just loved it, because for me, I wanted to really make sure that you know, Claire didn't just come back from France and brush her hands and be the same woman she's always been. I mean, I wanted there to be a change in her, and I wanted to see that, you know, when something catastrophic like a miscarriage, especially a late term miscarriage like that happens to someone, it changes you deeply to your core. And, you know, if whatever you've experienced in life, there's always a long time to heal, and sometimes you know, it will bring things up in your life that you've been suppressing, that are completely unrelated, but they tie in together. And so I thought this was a really beautiful way to show that Claire is much more fragile in some ways. And you know, and I love the writing of it, and it was also nice to try and find that kind of more innocent and more youthful Claire right before the accident happens. And you know, you just have these little glimpses of trying to track a lifespan of somebody, and before all these certain experiences and what they do to you. And I find that so interesting as an actor in this situation, to be given a character that you're not only just playing different time periods, but you're playing someone at different points in their life. And that's such an interesting challenge to me. So to see her sort of earlier on, and, you know, what makes somebody youthful, or what makes somebody a little more innocent, and then when that horrific thing happens, you know, it was great to see her relive that, and it's you know, I think anyone who's been through something like that, and I you know, I did a lot of reading online about PTSD, and I did a lot of research and reading firsthand accounts and forums of what people were sharing. And, you know, it's that thing of feeling like you cannot get out of your skin, that if you could just take your skin off and put it somewhere else. And that was sort of my clue with Claire, because she's just trying to like keep it all under wraps, but it just keeps bubbling up to the surface, and she lashes out at people, and she becomes very uncharacteristically impatient. And but it's also, I you know, what I loved was that the one thing that sort of helped her, I guess, start to get over that and start to be able to handle it was speaking about it. You know, this is a time period where it's pre-therapy, and you know, anyone will tell you that being able to share your experience and being able to have someone hear you and understand you, and then for Jamie to be there and say, I'm never going to leave you, I have your back, that's then the catalyst for her being able to be like, okay, actually I can do this, you know. So I thought it was fantastic writing, and it was another great storyline to be able to play.
So to wrap up, a few years ago you were a professional friend. Now you're the star of an international sensation, and then you get to do movies with George Clooney, Julia Roberts, directed by Jodie Foster. Was that as fun as it looked? Because watching it was a really fun experience. But talk us through Money Monster, because that looks like a lot of fun.
It was fantastic. I mean, for me, it was a very technical film to film, because I unfortunately was not in the TV studio with George and Julia that much, you know, so I didn't get a first row seat for George's dancing, which I wish I had. But it was fantastic. I mean, working with Jodie was, it was incredible. I mean, I couldn't have picked, or I couldn't have gotten a better project to do in my hiatus last season. It just was like a dream role. But it was, that was the thing. I love that subject matter. I love those type of films. I love films that are smart and like have a point of view, and like, you know, without being preachy, want to tell you something about how we are and where we're at, and maybe how we should maybe think about what we're doing with, be it the media or finance world, but yet at the same time be entertaining and be fun. But you know, there was definitely about a week where I was sitting in front of a green screen, and I did so much with earpieces in my ear, and so Julia, especially, all of our stuff she was in another place, or either had pre-recorded some stuff, and I was in my room, and I was being live fed into their studio, and so they could see me and hear me, but I could only hear her. And so she would be like, what are you reading over there? What are you doing? And we would have these conversations back and forth. But I was like, oh my God, I have Tinkerbell in my ear. But it was amazing. I mean, they're legends in this industry. And I've seen probably most films that all of them have done. And it was pretty mind-blowing, definitely.
I totally can imagine. Well, Caitriona, we hope to see you at the Emmys in a few months' time. We reckon you'll be there, but you never know in this day and age. There's a lot of really good TV, a lot of really good actresses vying for those Emmy nominations.
That's good.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
So much. That's a good thing. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.